Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah amma ba'd. Okay, Ikhwan. We're going to actually go through the. So, just to remind people, brothers, so we've already started the text, and we already started with chapter 1, which we've completed. We actually covered half of chapter 2, which is Waladul Azar, and we're actually going to start from chapter 2 and start from the beginning and go through the end bit of chapter 2. Okay? Now, a lot of the Arabic in here is Quranic Arabic as well. So even though it's Qasas or Anbiya, it's based on the Prophet's stories, which are in the Quran. So a lot of the vocab is from the Quran. Okay? But the idea with the Qasas or Anbiya is that it's actually geared for children, meaning that the Arabic is much simpler. And because the Arabic is simpler, we're able to understand the grammar better. And then when it comes to the more complicated Arabic, such as Quranic Arabic or classical Arabic, we're going to be able to understand it because we already understood the basic grammatical equations. So it's like with any equation, you just start simple and then you get more complicated methods of using those equations and applying them. So this is the principle of why we're going through Qasas or Anbiya. Okay? And as we go through it and we get a bit more grounded, we're going to start to introduce Quranic verses as well, because I know that's one of the aspirations of the group, is that we can feel it, read it, you know, with our with the Quran. But we just need to have a little patience there before we get on to that, and we need to just get through some core Arabic before we actually embark on that. Because the idea here is not to just understand the words. That is easy. A word for word Quran translation can do that. You don't need any teacher, no grammar. You can just do that simply. This is not what we're doing here. We're actually working out how the words are constructed and why did Allah choose the way that He constructed it, which is called balagha. Okay? Right, so let's start. So we've got Waladu Azara. And so, just for the reminder for the brothers from last week, this is a mudaf ilay construction, which is a murakkab ghayru mufid, a phrase. And you've got the waladu and then the azara. And we understood that we could recognize this to be the case because there's no tanween and there's no al. And if there would, and that's always indicative of a mudaf ilay construction. The second thing that we went through a little bit of detail is that we knew the mudaf ilay should be in jar, and therefore it should have a kasra, but we understood that there are certain isms which are change restricted, and one of the examples will be foreign names. So Azar is a foreign name, and that's why it will have, for the rafa it will be in dhamma, for the nasab it will be in fatha, and in the jar it would also be in fatha. Okay? And that's what we're seeing here. Okay? So that explains that. And then we moved on to the next line, and we understood that the wa is really, in classical Arabic and in Quranic Arabic, the things that you see, like the full stops, are bid'ah, innovations, in a good sense, of where sentences are completed. But in pure Quranic classical Arabic, there are no full stops, there are no commas, there are nothing, just lines and lines and lines and lines. And if you ever venture to online to look at the old, you know, the ones that are preserved, the old Uthmani script, you will see that in Kuf that it's just lines and lines and lines. The full stops came much later to help us to know where things stop. But in classical Arabic, if you actually want to put in a full stop or a beginning of a line, it's the wa. So it's not literally and, it can be, but in this context, it's just the beginning and start of the new sentence. Okay? So you don't say and this, and that. You start with the sentence, and then the next sentence, and then the next sentence.
But is it always like that, or is it?
No. So it can be with and, it depends on the context of the ayat. And so this is something that you'll be gradually introduced. So that's your first principle, that you just need to understand that wa doesn't necessarily mean always and. It can just mean the beginning of a sentence, in Arabic called jumla. So here we can consider it in this context as the beginning of a sentence. Okay? So really then the sentence begins with kana. Okay? And just a reminder, is that we talked about Jumla Ismiya. Okay, so the Jumla Ismiya. Ismiya is really, so these are nominative sentences, like in English, we could say, like, the book is new, right? So a Jumla Ismiya means it begins with a noun. So book is a noun, it's not a verb, right? You only have two types of sentences in Arabic. Verbal sentences, which are called Jumla Fi'liya, and you have nominative or sentences that start with a noun, which are called Jumla Ismiya. Two types, that's all. So this Jumla Ismiya is an example. The book is new. So if you wanted to say in Arabic, you'll say Al-Kitabu Jadidun. Jadidun. Okay? So the book is new. Okay? And then we understood that this would be divided into two things. So the Jumla Ismiya is divided in two things. So there are two types of sentences. In Jumla Ismiya, two parts. The first bit is the Mubtada. Okay. And then the Khabar. And literally, Mubtada means what begins with, you know? Ibtada. Ibtada, okay? And also, yeah, Ibtada. And so this is what it begins with. And Khabar is that describes or informs of what is introduced. So what is introduced is the book to begin with. And what is it informed about the book? The fact that it is new, right? So that's the way of understanding. So every Jumla Ismiya has those two parts. No matter how many words are in it, right, it consists of two parts that you have to split. The thing that you have to realize is that there is no is. It is presumed. The division itself presumes there is an is. Okay? So you won't find the word is in here. So Al-Kitabu, Jadid means the book, and this bit is actually the split. All right, so it's a presumed is, okay? So, is new.
Sorry to stop.
Yes.
Will it always be with a dhamma, like jadidun, can't be jadidan?
Okay, so this is the second thing that we need to realize. So we understand that there's two parts. What we also realize is that the mubtada and the khabar are in rafa. Rafa is basically with a dhamma. Okay, and same for this as well, all right? So both the mubtada and the khabar are in rafa, all right? And what this basically means is that every ism, every noun has three grammatical states, all right? So if we say kitab, so writing kitab here, so okay, kitab. The grammatical states are going to be three for kitab. Either with dhamma, which is called rafa, either or fatha, which is in the state of nasab, or with a kasra, which is in the state of jar, right? And it is this grammatical state that will tell you a lot of information about the word and how it's applied in the sentence. And the example that we used in our very first lesson was actually daraba zaydun amran. Okay, daraba is the verb, amr and zayd are two nouns. Okay, but if you look at amr and zayd, amr is in fatha and zayd is in dhamma. And that dhamma on zayd means that it must be the subject. And the fatha on amr must mean it's the object. Okay? And what we said is that we can then put these words in any mixture. We could put amr first and zayd last. Right? It would still mean, if it's amran, daraba zaydun, it still means that zayd hit amr. Or we could say zaydun daraba amran. right? So in English, we can only do the subject first. We're restricted. And remember, in Urdu, we can say Zaid ne Amar ko mara or Amar ko Zaid ne mara. Yeah, you can swap it around. Same in Arabic. But the beauty of Arabic is that with Urdu, you have flexibility, but you need 5 words to do the flexibility. In English, you have conciseness, only 3 words, but restricted, no flexibility. In Arabic, you've got both, concise, only 3 words, and all the flexibility because of this end grammatical state. All right, so this is the issue. So when it comes to Jumla Ismiya, then we understand the rule. The grammatical rule is that the mubtada is in rafa and the khabar is also in rafa. So that's why you will see al-kitabu jadidun, right? And the reason that al-kitabu has a single dhamma and jadidun has a double dhamma or a dhammatain, okay, is because this is indefinite article, all right? So this is a way of saying that this is the book rather than a book. So if we want to say a book is new, then we would say kitabun jadidun. But because this is the book, that's why we have al-kitabu jadidun is new. All right? So, having understood that, the reason of bringing this is that, okay, that's simple, but we also talked about harfs, okay? So we understood there are 3 types of words, okay? And here we saw the ism as the first type of word, right? Okay, so isms. But we understood there are 2 others, and we mentioned one which is the fi'l, right, for the verb. So like kicking, hitting, reading, sitting, all that, these are verbs. But we also know that there are another type of words called harf. Okay? These are particles. Harf means particle, like wa. Yeah? So wa would be a particle. Okay? Which means or. So it's little words, yeah? But or in, fi, bi, yeah? But these words in themselves, okay, don't have any meaning, intrinsic meaning. Right? A noun has an intrinsic meaning. It's either a name of person, a name of a thing, or a place. It has some intrinsic meaning. A verb is an action, yeah? But a particle has no meaning on its own. When you say and, what do you mean and? You can say the book and the glasses, right? Then it has a meaning when it's combined with. Or I walked into the house. But into on itself means what? Nothing. Until I say I walked into what? A house. Then it has a meaning in the context of the whole sentence. So these are harfs, okay? They're particles that don't have any intrinsic meaning unless it's brought in with other words like isms and verbs, okay? So why I'm saying this is because these particles we understood are amil or gayru amil. What that means is that these particles, yeah, are sometimes neutral, gayru amil, meaning that if you put them in a sentence, they're not going to affect the words around them, right? Because remember, we said that isms have grammatical states, right? So there's things that can affect those grammatical states, other words, right? Okay, so harfs can do that. Some harfs can do it. That's why we have amil and gayru amil, harfs that affect other words, and other harfs that don't affect. So an example of one that does not affect words is wa, and. It has no effect on other words, doesn't change their grammatical states, right? But there are others that do, okay? And one example, one that does, is fi, or prepositions. So if we want to say, like, in the garden, yeah? Okay, or in the house, fil bayti. Okay, so we don't say fil baytu, we say fil bayti, right? So that harf, fi, changes the al baytu to bayti. Yeah?
Will that always be the case?
It will always be the case. It's a rule. Okay, so there you can see an example of a harf that affects the words. All right, now there are also harfs that don't only come in between words but come at the beginning. all right? And there's two examples that we have so far used, which is the inna. Okay, right? So inna means indeed. So if I want to say indeed the book is new, what will happen there now? I connect it to this. What you'll find is that al-kitabu jadidun becomes this. Innal kitaba jadidun. Because of inna. Does that. See? So you can see a harf now has changed it. So the book is new to adding innal kitaba jadidun. Indeed, the book is new. Al-kitaba changes to a fatha. So you see, Zubayba, yeah.
But when we look at the Surah of Quran, it's Inna anzalnahu, not anzalnaha.
Yes, that is correct. And the reason being is that hu, which is number 6 lesson down the line, is what we call mabni. Right? So this is something that you have not been introduced to. So I don't want to confuse the people here, but the idea at the moment is to understand that isms have grammatical states, and they have that. If you just hold your ears for this one, but let Zubair here, is that some isms actually do not change their grammatical state. They have a grammatical state, but they don't reflect it through a dhamma or that. So prepositions or personal pronouns don't. So hu will always be hu, whether it's in rafa, nasab, or in jar, it'll always be a hu, because it's what we call mabni, one that does not reflect its grammatical state. Whereas with azar, it partially does, right? It's a partial, it's a restricted reflection. There are some that don't do totally, right? And so pronouns are an example that don't do totally. So it'll always be hu no matter what. Please don't judge that. Zubair will answer from the previous lessons, but why he want that question. But we'll come into that, and those are called mabni, okay? Okay, so here you got the inna. So there you see that the ism has to change to al-kitaba, right? And it's called jadidun, right? So now you've got this idea that you've got jumla ismiya, right? And you've got particles that go in between, like fil bayti, in the house. So it goes from dhamma to kasra, from rafa to jar. But also you've got particles that come before the sentence and will affect the whole structure. So they'll make the mubtada nasab instead of rafa, and they'll make the khabar stay in rafa. Okay, so these are harfs like that. Now why did I do all this? Because if we go back to the text now, so you've got this basic, and look, you may just digest 25-30% of this, but it's going to keep repeating itself. So that 35% will go to 40%, 50%. So don't feel you have to be 100% on it. It's going to be repeated. Yeah.
Is there a possibility of joining kitab and jadid, like kitab bil jadid?
Yes, there is. And see what that will do. Okay. And I don't want you to digest it, but I will tell you the reason is that that's a mawsul sifa relationship. What that basically means is that an adjective describing a noun has to follow it in every respect in terms of definite article. So if it's if we want to say the new book, so you say the sentence is al-kitabu jadidun, the book is new. But if you want to say the new book, then you go al-kitabu jadidu. So and the jadidu is al-jadidu. Al-kitabu, if you want to break it down, say al-kitabu al-jadidu. So you combine it together. Yeah. Okay. So there you'll have the same representation. So there you'll see that, but that's because of a different phrase. Okay. But we'll come to that. But all right. So if we go back to the text, so the reason I mentioned it is because of this first sentence. All right. So here, what you'll see is, all right, if we just take out the kana, right, you're actually dealing with a jumla ismiya. Why? Because the first word is an ism. And we know the first word, if it's a noun, then it's a jumla ismiya. It's not a verb. So there automatically you know it's a jumla ismiya. So then you've got to think, well, what do I do about this thing over here? Right? And this is the thing that changes the whole state. And I'll come back to that in a second. So here would be the mubtada. And here is the khabar. Okay. Now this looks like a very long word. I'm not going to break it down for you because that will just overwhelm you at the moment. But what you can say, that this is the mubtada and this is the khabar. Okay, for the jumla ismiya, because we said it has to be two parts, right? So one word here, one part, and all of that. And what it means is, Azza belonged to him, a righteous, Rashidun, Waladun Rashidun is a righteous boy. Rashidun Jiddun, a very righteous. Okay, that's what it basically means, yeah? So belonged to Azza was a very righteous boy, okay? The was actually comes from the kana. All right, that makes it come into the past. All right, so kana. Okay, if kana wasn't there, it'd be Azza belonged to him, a righteous boy. Okay.
So kana is a harf here?
I'll come to that in a second. I'm going to answer that question. So Azza belonged to him is a righteous boy. Is a righteous. Remember the is, so the is comes in there. All right, but the kana converts it from is to was. Without that, it is. So Azza belonged to him is a righteous boy, a very righteous. Okay, right? Now, with the kana, it converts it into was, right? Now, it's similar to harf, but actually, the concept here that you need to understand is that there are words that come before a sentence. One is a harf, and the other one is kana, right? Okay, there aren't that many. So there's not going to be hundreds of words that come before that change it. There's only a few, right? One is kana, that makes this sentence in the past tense. It is actually a verb, right? The was verb, all right? Okay, and it's actually, but it affects jumla ismiyas. There's no verbal sentence in here. So we call this a fil naqis, yeah? So, fil naqis. Okay? What that basically means is an auxiliary verb. It's like a verb. Alright? And it's called an auxiliary verb. Right? And why it's called auxiliary verb? Because again, remember what we said. Mubtada and khabar, so that must be rafa and rafa. So, yeah, dhamma and dhamma. Okay? The kana makes azar rafa, but the khabar nasab. Whereas in the nominative sentence, both are in rafa, with kana, rafa, rafa and nasab. Right? With inna.
Sorry, what's nasab?
So nasab is with the fatha. Remember the grammatical states. 3 grammatical states. Rafa, dhamma, in general. Nasab, in general with a fatha. And the 3rd grammatical state is jar. Normally expressed with a kasra. Not all the time, but in general. But you have to expect the 3 grammatical states. This thing you've got to just try and get in tune. Every noun has to have one of the 3 grammatical states. Rafa, nasab, or jar. In a nominative sentence, both are in rafa, jumla ismiya. In a jumla fi'liya, a verbal sentence, the subject is in rafa and the object is in nasab. So these are equations that you just got to know, all right? One thing that I want the other brothers to understand, which they've gone through, is that the other concept that we actually now understood is that this grammatical state doesn't necessarily just affect one word. It could be a whole group of words, a murakkab. Yeah? And we really labored this point last week, that this khabar is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 words in there, and all 7 in totality represent the khabar in the state of rafa. Okay, but if you look in there, there will be in there you'll see that there are dhammas, but there is also a fatha. And you know, well, how can fatha represent rafa? Because the words have to worry about themselves internally. All right, so they will internally represent different depending on what's inside of it, but the whole sentence in total is in the state of rafa and is in khabar. And this is what you've got to keep just trying to get your head around, is that we're dealing with a murakkab here. All right, okay. This one is in single word, so therefore you'd expect it to reflect it, because there's only one word to deal with. There's nothing, all right? So there you know that it's going to be the Dhamma, the end is going to represent the word. But here you cannot, because it's a whole group of words. Right? So all you can say is that whole murakkab is in the total, is in the state of rafa, because of it being the khabar of kana. All right? So here, so just to make this difference, so what we then say is that this part, so instead of this called the mubtada, we call this the ism of kana, and this the khabar of kana. All right? Because of this, just that it's a slight alteration. Okay? So then we moved on, and then we see wakana. So that doesn't mean and, it's just the new sentence, right? So you can really take that out in terms of translating. You don't have to put and. And there you got the kana again. So there you know it's got to be some sort of ism of kana and khabar of kana. The kana is there, so it can't be a jumla fi'liya. So you can say, well, this must be the ism of kana, okay? But then what we also realize is that you have to look at the words, all right? And see where this phrase ends. The actual phrase ends here, right? I'm not going to go into tell you why, because it's going to be too much at the moment. The brothers should know, because they can see a mudaf ilay relationship here, all right? But don't want you to just listen, but don't try to analyze it yet. It's just going to be too overwhelming at the moment. We'll come back to it repeatedly. So the brothers know that the phrase relation is a mudaf ilay relationship. So therefore, that whole mudaf is the actual ism of kana, okay? And there they can also, this is the ism of kana. This is the khabar of kana.
Oh, this is the whole.
Yeah, Ibrahima. So in this one, you can see that the ism of kana in this one was only one word, and the khabar of kana was many words. Here it's swapped around. Here, the ism of kana is many words, and the khabar of kana is one word. In the khabar of kana, you can see it's reflecting correctly in the nasab. In this one, because it's a murakkab, it won't, because each word has to worry about itself in the context of the other words inside of it. So there you can see the difference, okay? All right? Okay. So, yeah, okay. So now, what we're going to do is go to this one, all right? So again, very simple. Cross out the wa. For the translation point of view, it just means the beginning. So kana again comes, okay? All right? So kana Ibrahimu. Okay, we understood, and so Ibrahimu is the beginning of the ism of kana. Where does it end? Is it one word or many? We see yura. Yura is a verb. And we know that when there's a verb, that must be the beginning of another sentence. So if that's the case, then the phrase relationship ends right here, because no way can that sentence continue. You won't understand this quite yet, but just get the idea of kana, and we'll come into this. The brothers over here will appreciate this. And then the khabar of kana is actually all of this. Right? Okay? So the ism of kana and the khabar of kana. Right? Now, the khabar of kana, the brothers will tell me, what type of murakkab is this? Murakkab means more than one word. It's a jumla. Yeah. So now you're appreciating that the actual khabar, you know, we had the book is new. It was just one word. Now, and the jadidun was the khabar, right? Here, what you can see is that you've actually got a full sentence in the khabar. So now you're appreciating that actually in the khabar, it doesn't just have to be one word. It doesn't have to be a phrase, okay, like belonged to him was a righteous boy. It can actually be a whole sentence. A whole verbal sentence can occupy the space of the khabar of kana. And then what we do is we break that down. And this one you can pay a little attention to, because now we're looking at the first verbal sentence for you guys, jumla fi'liya. And the reason it's a jumla fi'liya is because you see the verb. Okay, right? Then what we understand, the principle with verbs, okay, is that they have to have minimum of two things for a verb.
Sorry, how do
Yes.
we know that this is a verb?
Okay, so that we're not going to cover too much in detail. The idea here is that you will be able to recognize that as a verb in time. We haven't covered. This is the science of sarf, which means the morphology of the word. So we're not going to talk about it today, because that will come in next. But when we go back to this, once you've learnt the science, you will immediately recognize that as a verb. So just take it for granted for the time being, but you will eventually know what are verbs and what are nouns, okay? So just accept it for the time that this is the verb, okay? So a verbal sentence has to have a minimum of two things. It needs to have a verb and it needs to have a subject, okay? Why a subject and not an object? Because there are certain verbs where you don't need an object. For example, he sat. That's a full sentence, a full verbal sentence, okay? Right? Whereas he hit, you need to say something. Who did he hit? He hit the wall, or he hit Amr. Then you need an object. So verbs can be transitive, meaning it needs an object to trans onto, or it can be intransitive, like sit or sat. Yeah? You can say he sat on a chair, or you can just say he sat. That's a complete sentence, right? He is hitting. You have to complete the sentence. It's meaningless. He's hitting what? So that becomes a transitive verb. He is hitting something, an object. All right? But that's why you can have a minimum of two. Fi'l, verb, a fa'il, subject, and in some instances, or a lot of instances, an object, depending on the context of what's there. All right? The verb, we use the terminology of maf'ul bihi. Okay?
We say here that this jumla fi'liya has to have the subject to end.
Jumla fi'liya has
It has subject at the end. Just like the subject has the end, like verb plus subject. For
Yes.
jumla fi'liya.
yes.
So it has to be starting with a verb, but has to end with the subject.
No.
or no?
Remember what we said? That the subject is denoted by the fact that it's in rafa. So if you go to like Zayd hit Amr, so Zaydun is the subject, okay? But we could say Daraba Amran Zaydun. It still means Zayd hit Amr, but because it's got the Dhamma, it tells us that Zayd is at, even though he's at the end, he's still the subject. Whereas in English, we can't do that. We have to say Zayd first, right? So the idea in Arabic is that you can swap it around because it's always Zaydun. So wherever you put Zaydun, he'll always be the subject, yeah? But the idea is that it needs a minimum requirement of a subject and the verb. And if it's in transit, if it's transit, then it may also need an object, maf'ul bihi.
Can we do it in English by doing it active voice and passive voice?
Oh, mashallah, Zubair is...
I don't want to go down myself.
This one we're going to cover, and that's another thing, okay? That's actually going to be quite interesting because then you're going into another realm because the active verb, block your ears because I don't want to confuse you guys, but for Zubair, is that what's interesting about this, and we'll come from examples that we will use active participles. What's interesting about that is that active participles are actually isms, but they have their meaning is a verb. So the hitter, or he is hitting, can be with the daraba or yadribu, but it can be darib as well.
What I'm saying
Yeah.
is that you said that English is not flexible.
Yeah.
It always has to have it in the beginning, the subject.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we do it active voice and passive voice, we can make it like, the object can be in the beginning and the subject can be the
Yeah, that's okay. That's called fi'l na'ib, and that's something a little bit different. There's still a subject. There's still a subject, even in the fi'l na'ib. So in the passive, there is still the passive verb, and there is a subject. In the meaning, so for example, you could say Zayd was hit. Right? So how would you do that? Okay, Zayd still is in Rafa. Right? So let me do it. Amr was hit. Because we always say Zayd hit Amr. So Amr was hit. Right? Block your ears a little bit for this. Or you can so where you would change it, you would say Duriba. Instead of Daraba, you say Duriba. So the verb is there. And Zaydun. So it would be Duriba Zaydun. So Zaydun is still in Rafa. And it means that Zayd was hit. So that's the passive participle, okay? The active is what we said, daraba, Zaydun, Amran. So daraba is the active, duriba is the passive. But it's better that we come to those examples, but still the equation still sounds that you need a minimum of a fa'il, a verb, whether it's active or passive, and a subject. In Zayd was hit, in meaning, he was the object, but in the grammatical sense, he's still the subject, Zaydun, because you need a subject, and that's why it's always in Rafa. It's not Duriba Zaydan, or Amran, it's Duriba Amrun.
What I meant that
Yeah.
English is also flexible.
You can, okay. Okay. Khair inshallah.
Probably end of the story for English.
Khair
But
inshallah.
English can also be flexible. If you use active voice and passive voice, then English can also alternate.
It can, but it's not as concise as Arabic.
Yeah.
Because in,
No, no,
because
I
in,
mean, the
because,
possibility is there.
yeah.
And they always recommend that always use active voice. Don't use passive voice. They always
Yeah.
discourage you to use passive.
Yeah, because in English you still need to use extra words to describe the passive and active. In Arabic, it's just change of the vowels,
Yes.
which is the conciseness. Yeah.
So that's-
Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to Arabic, inshallah. So, وَكَانَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ يَرَى. So here, this is the verb, okay? Now, there was a lesson that we did, which is called conjugation of verbs, right? Okay? What that basically means is, you know, in English, you have to say, he sat, or he hit, or they hit, or you hit. So you have to have two words, right? With the verb, you know, he hit, they hit, you hit, I hit, two words. In Arabic, you don't need that. You can just do it in one word. So the way it would happen when we did this exercise, we did with fa'ala, he did. So fa'ala, he did. Then we did fa'alu, they did. Fa'alta, you did. Fa'altum, you all did. Fa'altu, I did. Fa'alna, we did. What you find is that actually they're just slight change of the verb. Okay? But it's not a separate. You don't say I, ana, fa'ala. You can, but that means two words. But you can actually do it in one word, fa'altu. Which means I did. So you've got two words in English represented by one word in Arabic, fa'altu. Alright? Here, it's the same thing. Okay? Alright? Here, it's yura. Okay? In there, because I said that one word represents the two, like the pronoun within it, you take out a huwa. The huwa means he. Alright? And that's your fa'il. It's inside of it. Right? So there's your fa'il, because this is the maf'ul bihi. Alright? So your fi'l is he saw, or he sees. He is the huwa that's inside of it. Right? Okay? So because it always has to have fa'il. That's the rule. Verbal sentence, you have to show the fa'il.
What do you mean huwa is within there?
Alright, so like I said, so like if we talk about fa'ala, so fa'ala means he did. Alright, so fa'ala comes like this. Fa'ala equals he did. Right? Okay, so if that's a word in itself, okay, the rule is there must be a fi'l and a fa'il. It so happens the he is inside of it, so you just take it out. And the he is huwa. That's all it is. You just accept it. Don't think too deeply about it. Just know that it has a pronoun inside of it. Okay? They did will be fa'alu. So the way that happens is like this. Fa'alu. Okay? In this situation, you can see the day, which is the wa here. That represents the day. Alright? So there you would say that this is the fi'l and this is the fa'il.
But in case of yara, that
Yeah.
would be the only form, or can we have other forms?
You can have other forms. And we're not going to go into that because that's details down the line. Just for the time being, accept the concept that there is a pronoun inside of it based on this principle. So he sees. So the he must come out of there, which is the huwa. And that is the fa'il. And the rest is maf'ul bihi. The reason that an-nas is not the fa'il, because it's in nasab, which has a fatha. And the object in the verbal sentence is always in nasab. So, daraba zaydun amaran. Amaran being the object is in fatha. Fathatain, yeah? So that's why you can tell that actually this cannot be the subject. So it's not the people seeing. And this is where the confusion can arise when you're reading Quranic Arabic or whatever, is that, oh, is this the subject or is it the object? You have to know the rule to know that, yeah? So that an-nasa cannot be the subject. It can only be the object because of the fact that it's reflecting a fatha. All right. So, and the one that reflects a fatha as an ism, it's got to be in the state of nasab. All right. Okay. So this tells us that and this in itself is actually also a murakkab. This whole maf'ul bihi is a murakkab. Okay. And here, what you can do, and we're not going to cover it too much in detail, but just suffice, even for these brothers, they haven't gone through this. An-nas and yasjuduna lil asnam is a murakkab ghayr mufid. There's a phrase relationship here which we haven't covered yet. Okay, and within that phrase, you can see that there's another jumla fi'liya. Isn't that interesting? So here you would say yasjuduna lil asnam. Here you would say the yasjudu, which means to make sujood, obviously prostrating. This is the fi'l, and this is the fa'il, and this is the technical name. It's actually muta'alliq, which basically means because it's got the li in there. Okay, all right. But you can say that it's the object. It's what were they prostrating to? They were prostrating to the idol, asnam. Okay, but it has a technical name because it's followed by beginning by a preposition, so muta'alliq. But that could be, if it didn't have this, yashdul al-asnam, then it would be asnama, and this would obviously be the maf'ul bihi. All right, but because it's got a preposition, and this preposition li is what I told you about in the beginning, the harf, the amil, the one that affects words and the one that doesn't. Wa does not affect, li does. And that's why it's expressing it not in rafa, but in jar.
But if it were yasjudu nal
Yeah.
asnama,
Yes.
would it have the same meaning?
Now you're getting into the idea of balaga. Why it's expressed in that way? Because both could happen. So why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use this way as opposed to the other way that you said? Now that is where the tafsirs of the linguistics then work into why. Why they use active past participle, which is a noun, rather than a verb. They both have the same meaning. This is now the method of expression. Both are scientifically, grammatically possible. You counted. But why choose one another? There obviously is a difference in connotation and in meaning. Like there is in English when you can say, even like when you say like, Amr, he was hit by Zaid. You're stressing Amr. Or you can say Zaid, yeah, Zaid. Zaid hit Amr. So you're stressing Zaid. Yeah. Or you say he was hit, Amr, by Zaid. You know, they each have a different kind of connotation. And same for this. You know, why the li is in there has an extra. So in terms of basic meaning, yes, but there is a difference. There's a subtle difference in meaning and connotation, which is what the scholars point out particularly in the Quran, and this is the method of balagh. But you can understand the concept now, and you can think, oh yeah, and when the scholar talks about, well, this one is a muta'alliq, but a maf'ul bihi, you'll understand this wording now. And so that Allah chose a muta'alliq with a li, and not straight to asnama. And the idea there maybe is because of X, Y, and Z. And this is what Allah's trying to do. And then you start to get a greater, deeper comprehension as to how Allah constructed those words together, because you understand the science.
Isn't that's what you use in translation?
Of course,
Yeah,
you do.
Because the same thing, isn't it?
Exactly. Because what you pointed out is absolutely right. You could have had yasjuduna al-asnama. You could have. And yasjuduna lil-asnam has exactly the same meaning in basic translation. But clearly there is a difference. There is a difference that you can only start to appreciate if you understand the Arabic science, the grammatical science. And that's what we're doing. So it's a way of inspiration for you guys that we're doing this to be able to appreciate, in one sense, this point that you've just pointed out. Okay?
So that will come in this difference will come in tafsir,
Of course.
because it will
Yes.
not come in translation.
It will
the
not-
normal
It will
translation.
not come in normal translation.
So I
It will only come in
say
tafsir.
so going through with the only translation is no good. You have
good.
to go for
You have to. Because you have to ask, because the question is, and I don't know the answer, why was it chosen to lil asnama as opposed to asnama? That's a question. And you then have to appreciate the whole Arabic language, the classical Arabic, and the poetry and all that in the context to then appreciate why this particular phrase was chosen.
I think just one.
That's deep.
Make a quick point
Yes.
regarding saying here is that I think even in translation, until it's written by a linguistic,
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
there's an energy to see like
Even
the
Tafsir,
subcontinent
you
is
won't
like,
find it.
oh, Madhudi Sahib has written a tafsir,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
they would not go
No.
into the
No.
balagha of the.
Yeah.
I think Ustad Naman does.
He does.
Yeah.
I don't know how
He,
he
so far we have seen he is the only one.
Yeah,
who
he's
does
the only
that.
one who does this.
So, but he learns it from the.
Oh,
written
I'm
in
sure,
Arabic.
obviously, I'm sure.
Forget Arab.
Yeah, there
Beautiful
must be
tafsir
so many other
written by Arabic.
Yes. And the whole idea with this program is that once we've done this and we have accomplished this, we start on that. This is part of the 5-year or 10-year, whatever, how long it takes. That's what we'll go on to. So we'll go through like Imam Ghazali's book on tafsir of the Quran, linguistic tafsir. There are so many out there, classic. And in there, they don't even have vowels in it. You know, but you'll be at a position come that once if we go through this successfully, inshallah, that even these vowels are not even required. Can you imagine? These vowels are not even required for you to work it out. And that's why they say that your grammar has to be supreme in order for you to really understand the classical Arabic. Because classical Arabic is without tashkil. This is a children's book with the tashkil to help you. All right? When we start to go to that level, all of that is gone. It's just the words and no full stops, nothing. But you'll be able to do it because of this process that you follow. So what we're doing, you go big and then you home in, bang, bang, and home in, home in. So you big squares into subset squares, into little squares. What you're doing here is like I said to the brothers, is like learning to drive for the first time. You say, okay, I need to clutch, gear, accelerator, hands on steering wheel, and move. I then come to a roundabout, I slow down, go low gear, put the brakes on and stop. Then I look left, I look right, look rear. You see, this is what you're doing here. But then you get to a point where it just becomes automatic pilot. You just do this as you're flowing. Because we do it, if you do it every single line like this, it becomes a habit. It becomes like you just do it. Yeah, so just think of it like driving. It looks slow and arduous and protracted, but this will become normal. And that's why it's the practice of doing this. Like you saw, we did so many kana. And again, we did kana, kana, kana. So you already broke it down. Bang, 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 bang. Okay? All right? Now, okay, so I just want to move on a little bit because I wanted to actually introduce a new concept for the brothers because this is all revision for the brothers. Okay? So...
That's what you think.
Well, what, and as the brothers realize that any smart aleck gets asked the question first, as to Ali's detriment last week, when I think Paul Zubayba was put on that, then Ali got it. But here, what I want to introduce, just a subtlety, is this word is actually not a word like that. It's actually a continuation. And I'm not going to explain to you why or what, because that's another lesson. But here, this is actually a continuation where you would say that is and, right? And you would see there's no kana. So we said that kana makes it in past. But that kana transmits to it. So it doesn't need to have a kana in that. And I'm not going to explain to you why, but just appreciate this is another subtlety that we'll go into great detail later on. But here you see no kana. You see kana, kana, kana. Then you see ra and kana. But here we would still interpret it with a kana inside of it because of the context. So what it's saying is that Ibrahim would see the people, An-Nas, yasjudunam, prostrating to the idols, and would see the people worshipping Ya'budun al-Asnama. Alright? Here, Brother Qais will say, you had yasjudun al-Asnam. Here you can see yasjudun al-Asnama, because there's no lih. Remember? There's no lih, as there was there. So there it is a direct maf'ul bihi. Yeah, so that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, so you still got the fi'l, the fa'il, and this time no li, and straight into the object maf'ul bihi, which is in nasab. And this one was lil asnami, and this is al asnama. Exactly what you asked. So there you see the two differences. Okay?
So balagha wise, what's the difference there? Just
I don't know. I don't know. Because this is the point where we're all going to go together. All right? I don't know. And this is what we can start to imagine that we might get to know if we get to that stage of understanding the science. To be able to answer that question, what is the difference? I can tell you a little bit, right? The little bit I will hint, because there's an inquisition that I'll satisfy for you, is that actually, and this is a rule, but I don't want you to get too bogged down, but just for Amar Bhai, just to satisfy him, because what you find is that vocabulary isn't just on the word alone, yasjudu. The preposition li adds to it a meaning. So you don't, li literally on its own means to. With a verb, yasjudu li has a particular meaning. It could be yasjuduna fi or yasjuduna al-asnama. The li has a different meaning. So it doesn't mean that you literally have to translate it. And this is vocabulary.
Is it the same as we say lillah? Is it the same? Or is it
Like
different?
towards Allah
Yes.
and
So we prostrate to Allah, okay? You can put the to. Sometimes it's inappropriate to put a to in there. But the verb itself requires the lip because it's part of vocabulary.
Isn't
All right.
lillah, when we say lillah, it means for God's sake?
Or belongs to or to Allah. Again, it depends on what's the word before it.
I think it's like into, or you know how we use
It depends.
No, but what I'm saying
Yeah.
is that's what the construction is. That's why.
Maybe not. Maybe not. So it might be that yasjuduna li could be yasjuduna bi, has a completely different meaning. All right. But the li might be connected with the. I don't want to go too much in detail because it's getting too, and then we'll get. I want us to keep simple processes because this we are going to revisit. So that's the other subtlety that we're going to come through, and it will be satisfied through examples. Okay. All right. But let's just come back again. All right. So there you see. So here, for example, you have the yara. So there you have the fa'il. It's a jumla fi'liya. Okay. Here you have the huwa. So that's the fa'il, the fi'l, and the maf'ul bihi. Okay. Is an-nas ya'budun al-asnama. Okay. And in here, an-nas has a phrase relationship with ya'budun al-asnama. Alright? We haven't covered that phrase relationship, just accept it for the time being. Within that phrase, there's a full verbal sentence within that. So the whole thing is a verbal sentence, right? The big picture, verbal sentence with yara, okay? But the thing I want you to notice is that you see al-asnama. So you might think it's due to this yara, but this al-asnama is actually due to ya'buduna, right? Because you put the box in. But if you look at it blanketly, you might think, oh, yara al-asnam. So he saw the idols. You could misinterpret it that. But by doing the big box, you think, no, that's the fi'l, that's the fa'il. What's the maf'ul bihi? Oh, this is the whole maf'ul bihi. Okay, what's going on in here? We have an-nas. There's a phrase relation between these two. And ya'buduna. So the fatha is due to this, not due to this. And it's only by doing the box method will you realize why this is what it is. All right? Or any word. Okay? So you've got fi'l, a jumla fi'liya, and within that you have also another jumla fi'liya within the construction. Okay? Now we come to the new topic. This was all revision, and now, and I'm only going to do this one because I know we've already covered a lot, but I'll cover this as a new just to satisfy the brothers. Eagerly awaited today's lesson.
If you guys get a chance to review the previous lessons on the video,
10 times each video, please.
Okay, so here, the one that we're actually going to look at is this one. Okay, now I'm going to let Amr start the breakdown, and then we'll introduce a new subject point once we come to it, but it's in that sentence. First of all, I would like you to just give me a word for translation, if you can, and then we'll break it down grammatically. So,
Kana was Ibrahim saw.
Ya'rifu.
Because of the kana is Ya'rifu.
Yeah.
Changing it to was seen.
No, Ya'rifu means knows.
Oh,
So he was knowing
knowing. Anna,
that
asna al-asna, the idols.
idols.
Hijaratun, moving.
No, hijar means are stone. Stone. Okay. So basically, Ibrahim knew because it's past that the idols are stone. Yeah. So he knew that they were. That's what it basically means. Okay. And so we understood on simple words that we can work out what it means just by the words itself. Yeah. But now we're going to do our process of grammatical breakdown. So, Amal Bhai, can you?
Sentence of kana.
Yeah. So what's this kana called? Yeah. Great.
Ibrahimu is the ism of kana.
And why is it just that?
Because Ya'rifu is coming after that, which is a word.
Verb. Fantastic. And what's the? So that's the ism of kana.
Yes.
And
Then the khabar of kana is Ya'rifu and al-asnama hijaratun.
great. So once we've done that box, what's the next box we go for in stepwise?
Jumla fi'liya Ya'rifu and al-asnama hijaratun.
Why do we do that? Because,
It starts with the word.
and also,
Starting with this new, it's a khabar.
but why not this box or that box?
Because that's murakkab.
Yes, murakkab. Exactly. Once we break down the boxes to single words, right? So the first, the fi'l naqis and the ism of kana are both single, so they're done with. But the murakkab, multiples need to be further broken, as Amal Bhai says. So okay, Amal Bhai, break this one down for me.
That's jumla fi'liya.
Correct?
So Ya'rifu
Yeah.
is they.
No.
No, correct, Zahid Bhai. Not they. Why is it they? So,
Because it's
yaf'alu. Yeah.
Okay. Ya'rif, so it's fa'ala.
Yaf'alu, fa'ala to yaf'alu. So it's a mudari, it's a present tense.
So so we take who out.
Correct, great. So,
So fail and file. File is who out.
But why is it Dhamma instead of Zabr?
okay, I'll explain that in a second. We'll come to it, he'll just wait and I'll come straight to that question. So first accept that this is the fa'il, we take the huwa out. This is the fi'l. This fi'l.
Maf'ul bihi anna al-islam.
Oh, great, all right. So I'm going to answer Afqais's question first. So this is again, same thing about sarf, morphology of words. You will know that there are three types of verbs. There are past tense, he did. There are present tense, he is doing. And there is the command verb, do. Three types of verbs, right? And they both have different ways of written. So with ya'rifu, if we usually do the fa'ala, so fa'ala means he did. Yaf'alu means he is doing. And the yaf is the ya and the dhamma that give you the signal that this verb must be a mudari, a present tense verb. If it was just past tense, it would have arafa. He knew. Arafa. So there would be no ya and there would be no dhamma. Arafa, like fa'ala. To yaf'alu. So ya'rifu, because of the dhamma and because of the ya, it tells you this verb must be present tense. Yeah. Okay.
But why, my question was why there is Dhamma instead of Zabr?
Instead of fatha. Fatha. Because fatha would indicate past tense. Fa'ala. So look, just to visualize it. So if we go to just fa'ala. So fa'ala. Okay, that's past tense. He did. Right? If we want to go, which is called mudari. And madi, which is, sorry, this is madi, past tense. If you want to go to present tense, which is he is doing, yeah, then this will be yaf'alu. So there'll be yaf'alu. You see? So there you will see that the difference between the two is that all the fathas here in the past tense. In the present tense, there's a ya and there's a dhamma there. And then you'll just know that's the general principle. And then here you see it being applied here with the ya'rifu. So you know it's present tense. And as Amr correctly said, is that this is the fi'l, the present tense verb. We take the huwa out because we need a fa'il. We need it. That's what makes a verbal sentence. There has to be a fa'il. So that's the huwa. So he was knowing. Okay, was knowing, because it's present tense, was knowing. All right, here we had that the idols are stone. Right, now here I want to introduce a new concept for the brothers. If you can digest it, great. This is going to be repeated. Okay, here is the anna. Right, so the anna, remember we said in the very beginning, yeah, that there's harfs that come before sentences. Okay, so if you actually took out the anna, al-asnamu hijaratun is a sentence. The idols are stone. That's a full sentence. That could be mubtada and khabar. Right? Yeah? Right? So the question is why do we have to have the anna in there? Besides meaning that.
It's an emphasis that indeed they are.
Nope. No, that's inna.
Inna.
Yeah. So why anna? Because al-asnamu hijaratun is a sentence. You could say new, the idols are stone. That is absolutely fine. The dat is actually incidental. You don't have to translate, you don't have to put the dat in. And it's not balaga. This is equation, grammatical equation. All right? So you could say ya'riful asnama hijaratun. That's actually, why not? The reason being, right? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to switch it, and I'll go back to this because this one is a really important point, and I want us to really slowly digest it, and we're going to finish on this. Okay. With isms, which are nouns, we said 3 grammatical states, right? We said rafa, okay? We said nasab, and we said jar, right? Okay? We said that, right? It can only be 3 grammatical states. What I also introduced in the beginning lessons is that jar, there are only 2 examples of when isms are in jar. Easy. That means only 2. In rafa, there are 8 ways it can be in rafa. And there are 12 ways it can be in nasab. To show you an example so you can understand it, we already said that in jumla ismiya, right, for rafa, we said that the mubtada and the khabar are both in rafa, yeah? The mubtada and the khabar, remember? The book is new, both are in rafa. So here you've got 2 out of the 8 already. Mubtada and khabar. We also said that daraba zaydun amra, zaydun, the subject is in rafa. So we can say the fa'il. Yeah? So we've already got, just on that, 3 examples of rafa, 3 out of 8. Easy, right? In jar, we already mentioned the mudaf, mudaf ilay, and the preposition fi. Then we said in the book. We said, fil bayti. And it's from baytu to bayti. So they're the 2 examples before preposition, which we call a jar majroor relationship, or in a mudaf, mudaf ilay. So Zayd's book would be kitabu Zaydin, not kitabu Zaydun. Kitabu Zaydin. So they're the only 2 examples, and we'll see that in a lot of seconds. So don't just accept for this timing. And then you have the nasab. Already we know a few nasabs. We know the maf'ul bihi, the object. So daraba Zaydun amaran. Amaran is in fatha, nasab. So the object, maf'ul bihi, is 1. We also said the kana, the khabar of kana is in nasab. So that's number 2. All right? And then the ism of inna is in state of nasab as well. All right? So we're gradually getting down to these things, okay, to work out. But what we also notice is that it's not necessarily just one word that is in the grammatical. It could be a whole sentence or a phrase. That's what we've been appreciating. So what I want to put is ism and murakkab. Because a murakkab could be in a state of jar. A combination of words, a combination of words could be in nasab. A murakkab could be in a state of rafa as well. All right, this is really important. Okay, so Okay, are we sort of getting that? Okay, so a combination of words can be. Now the thing is, with these combination of words, some of them are sentences and some of them are phrases. So we already knew that a khabar can be a full sentence or a phrase, right? So for the rafa and the khabar, it doesn't necessarily just to be an ism. It could be a murakkab, okay, which could be a jumla or a ghayr or a phrase. All right? It could be both. All right? Okay. Well, guess what? If we go back now that we know this, all right? Now that we know this, if we go back to that sentence, now with that in mind, if we go back to here, right here, so here we had ya'rifu, and this was the maf'ul bihi, right? Okay, and we had the huwa, remember?
Yeah.
All right, we had the fa, and this is maf'ul bihi, right? We know that maf'ul bihi is in a state of nasab, right? And we know it can also be a murakkab. But guess what? It can never be a sentence. It can only be a phrase. That's the rule. That is the grammatical rule. The object, the maf'ul bihi in a verbal sentence can never ever be a sentence. It has to be a phrase. So, if that's the case, that's why the anna is there. Because you know what the anna does? It converts it into a phrase. Right? How? Kaise? Because without it, the idols are stone is a full sentence. It's a jumla ismiya. That the idols are stone is a phrase. Because it's not complete. What is about that the idols are stone? You have to put something before it. It converts it into a phrase. So you have to have an anna because you can't. It has to satisfy the rule. You can't have it like ya'riful. It cannot exist. Ya'riful al-asnama hijab is not balagha. It's grammatically incorrect. Because a maf'ul bihi can never be a jumla of any sort. It has to be a phrase. The anna comes in to convert it into a phrase.
Remember in the first lesson I asked you in Azan, we said, Nashadu anna Muhammadan.
There. Now you can see. See, now you can start to see why. And that's why you find with the Arabs, when you say it in the wrong tashkil, they know intrinsically that's wrong because of their, of the familiarity. They may not necessarily know this rule, believe me, but they just know from in English, you just know it's just grammatically not correct. But that's the reason. Because in the state of nasab, for a maf'ul bihi object, it can be an ism, but it can't be a jumla. It can be a murakkab ghayru mufid, i.e. a phrase, or an ism, but it can never be a sentence. It then has to have the anna, right? And that anna converts it into a phrase. And what that anna also does is it's a harf, and it's a sister of inna, and it's a harf that is an amil, meaning it's a governing agent that changes the isms, right?
Does it have a meaning in itself?
No, that means nothing. That's what?
Anna doesn't mean.
It's the that.
It means that.
That.
That itself doesn't mean anything.
Right,
Okay, but what you see is if it was without the anna, if this was just a separate sentence, it would be al-asnamu, right? Hijar, yeah? Because that's what in the Jumla Ismiya, it has to have rafa, yeah? So the mubtada would be al-asnamu, hijaratun would be the khabar. The idols are stone. That's a very correct Jumla Ismiya. With the anna, what it does is that it becomes now the ism of anna and the khabar of anna. And the ism of anna is always in a state of nasab. So that's why it becomes al-asnama. Alright? And that's the rule. You just need to know it. It's just, yeah.
Is it Ibrahim or is it because it's a file? That's why it's in the state.
Yeah. So Ibrahimu is actually it's an ism of kana. And the ism of kana is always in rafa, but the khabar of kana. So this actual, so ya'rifu, so here you can see ya'rifu anna al-asnama is actually the khabar of kana. And khabar of kana can be a full sentence. So, yeah, okay, so you got no problem. It's a jumla fi'liya with ya'rifu. No problem, because a khabar of kana can be a murakkab, a jumla of any sort. So it satisfies the rule. Okay, Ibrahimu is the ism of kana and is always in a state of rafa. This murakkab is totally in a state of nasab.
And hijaratun is hijaratun dammatain because of Ibrahimu.
No. So hijaratun is in here is because this, let me do it in a different color. Hijaratun is actually the khabar of anna. And the khabar of anna is in rafa, not because of Ibrahim, nothing to do with it. You see? It has to worry about itself internally. That's why you do the box method. So you worry about what's in the box, not outside of it. So you have to divide it out. So this tun is nothing to do with anything outside of the kana and Ibrahim. Nothing to do with it. It's rafa because of anna. All right?
Anna doesn't have to have ism though. Anna,
Sorry?
Anna does not have to have ism, but it can have khabar.
Well, this is the ism. Al-asnama is the ism.
Is the ism of Anna?
Oh, it's the ism of anna. So al-asnamu, so if we want to break this down, so in this one you have the anna. Oh, maybe we need a few more colors. So anna, then you have the ism of anna, and then this is the khabar of anna. So you have, within this you have a big box, a red box, and a black box, breaking down each into its individual words. Yeah?
So it is, because it's in fatha, it's a state of rafa, I guess.
No, it's in nasab because of the rule of anna converts, that's the ism is into the state of nasab. Right? Kana converts the khabar into a nasab. Inna converts the ism into anna or inna, both they're sisters. Both will actually convert the ism into the state of nasab. It's just the rule. For kana, it's the khabar. For inna and anna, it's the ism that's changed into the state of nasab, the fatha. That's just the rule. Okay?
So I just want to ask,
Yeah.
maybe it's relevant to you.
It's okay.
That Ya'rifu,
Yeah.
what if it were Ya'rafu? Would that change the meaning? Like
Okay.
Ya'malu, Ya'malu,
Masha Barakallah Khaysar, Masha, you asked some really fantastic, and you're really into sarf. I can see that. You're going to be, inshallah, an expert on sarf, because this is the idea of sarf. And I've deliberately avoided it because actually, this one doesn't exist, Ya'rafu. Okay? It's just, it's a vocabulary thing. And so, like you have Yaf'alu, you have Ya'rifu. So, in Yaf'alu, it's with a fatha. And ya'rifu is with a kasra. That's just vocabulary. There's no science. It has no meaning implication of having a ya'rifu or ya'rifu. It's the way it's pronounced by the Arabs. And they chose a kasra as opposed. And some of the idea is that it's just a bit more difficult on the tongue to say ya'rafu, whereas ya'rifu is easier to say. That's one of the reasons why there might be a kasra as opposed to. So it's more about pronunciation. Okay? But there are tashkil implications, like we know with the end one, we've seen with the isms. There is also implications with the first one, and we'll talk about that. That's through sarf. We'll go through that step by step. Okay? But in this context, this has no meaning significance. It's just that this doesn't exist in the vocab. Alright? Okay, so I'm going to go through, well, actually, I'm going to get Abdul Rahim to actually go through this last example, because we've done the anna, and we're going to do the same thing here. Alright? And then just the two annas, and then we'll call it quits. Okay, so Abdul Rahim, if you could do, first of all, let's do a basic translation together, and then we'll break it down grammatically. Okay, so if it's wakana ya'rifu anna al-asnama, do you know what that basically means?
Well,
This is Abdul Rahim now. So this is Abdul Rahim's term. يعرف أن الأصنام لا تتكلم ولا تسمع. So he was knowing يعرف أن that الأصنام, the idols, لا, do not, تتكلم, do not speak, ولا, and Do not tasma'u, do not hear. Okay, so that's what it basically means. All right. So now this is the bit I've helped you out, but now I'm not going to help you out with the next bit. Abdul Rahim, I want you to break it down for me, please.
Okay. It's a common sentence.
Yeah.
Common field markers.
Correct.
It's jumla fi'liya.
Now, what's after kana? What's the next? When we do big boxes first.
Big boxes, okay.
So ya'rifu would be what?
Ism of kana.
Correct.
And then the rest would be khabar of kana.
Yes. So annal asnama wa la tatakallamu wa la tasma'u would be the khabar of kana. So what is the kana called? What's it called? A fi'l what?
Field of time.
No.
Which one? Field markers.
Fi'l naqis, and this will be called, the ya'rifu will be called the
Ism
of kana,
and khabar of kana.
khabar of kana. Great. Okay, so we understood that what box should we now break into? The
The khabar of kana.
khabar of kana, because it's a murakkab. Yeah? All right. Each of these are in singular. So how are we going to break this one down? The khabar of kana.
It's again a sentence of inna or anna.
Correct.
And so which means asnam is a ism of anna.
So we have anna on its own first
Yeah.
as the harf.
Yeah.
Okay, and that has a special name which we'll come to later. Don't want to complicate it further. So where's the anna? So what's the next box?
So asnam
Is what?
is a ism. So it's a anna ism of anna.
Okay, and why is it just stopping there? Why not carrying on? You're right, but why?
Because of the la.
Correct. Why? But because of the la. Not so much. Oh, you're close. You're getting warm. Why? Because the next word is a verb. Because la is really within that verb. It means to not do something. You know. So it's not. You know. So that is because this is la tatakallamu is actually a verb, and that's why it's the beginning of a new sentence. So then, this as Abdul Rahim says, so, and Amabai said, is that all of this becomes the khabar of anna. Okay, right.
What is the meaning of takallama?
So tatakallamu means to speak. Okay. So you know. So what we're saying is that you know, if we didn't have the anna, right? Okay, it would be. So it would be al-aslam. The idols do not speak and do not hear. That's a full sentence. What kind of sentence would that be without this? Just on its own, what kind of sentence are we dealing with? Al-asnamu. So let me just help you there and just.
Jumla ismiya.
Jumla ismiya, excellent. Because the mubtada, it would be then the idol, and the khabar would be
Tatakallam.
yeah, and that can be a full sentence because we know that the khabar on its own can have a full sentence, right? But we have ya'rifu. So ya'rifu means that that this is the object, yeah, right, and that cannot be a full sentence, and that's why you have the anna. Okay.
There has to be something before anna
Yes.
to make it a complete.
Correct. Okay.
So is it what we call mufid and ghayr mufid? So is it ghayr mufid?
Yeah. So this is a converting structure. So anna converts this into a ghayr mufid, a phrase that the idols do not speak and do not listen or hear. Okay, means it's not a full sentence. That you don't begin a sentence with that. It's got to have something before it. Okay, so it converts it down, or it waters it down from a jumla to a phrase, a ghayr mufid, a murakkab ghayr mufid, because of the fact that you've got ya'rifu. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, because we're just at the time, I'm actually going to quickly go through these ones. And if people want to interject, just again, just the principle again is kana, the ism of kana, and again you've got this khabar of kana. Then you have the anna, which is the watering down. And then you've got the ism of kana, which is in nasab. And then the khabar of kana, which is in rafa. Okay? And then within the khabar of kana, you have a jumla fi'liya going on. Okay? And then you carry on down here. Again, you've got a kana, you've got yara. So just to translate, wa kana ya'rifu. And he knew that al-asnama, the idols, la tadarru. Tadarru means do not harm, wa la tanfa'u, or nor do they benefit. Okay? And then you've got wa kana yara. And he would see anna, okay, again, so that will be the, all of that would be the khabar of kana, anna, dhubab, which are the flies, yajlisu, sitting, ala, upon the al-asnam, upon the idols, so, fala tadfa'u, so they do not defend or repel them, alright? Again, in here, you've got the anna, so, because you've got a full sentence, with yara, you can't have that, so it waters it down to a phrase. This becomes the ism of anna, dhubab, ba, and then yajlisu is a verb, so that's the beginning of the second bit, right? And goes all the way across. Okay?
Now this time we have asnami.
Yes.
Because of Allah.
Very good. So this is actually a jar, a preposition. And the jar majruru phrase is the jar is an amil. It's a converting agent. It converts the dhamma to a jar grammatical state, from rafa to jar, and that's expressed as a. That's why it's al asnami, because of this. This ala is the same as the one that we talked about, the li. Why is there a li before it? Because you could, here you could say, yeah, okay, it means sits upon, but it could have another meaning with the ala. It doesn't have to mean its literal meaning ala. It has to be in the context of what's the verb before it. Because you'll find that certain verbs will mean to strike or defend, depending on the preposition that follows. That's purely vocab, all right? Here, which is interesting, like I would like you to see, and this is a really, can anyone spot it? This is the last one that we finish on, I promise, okay? Here, we've got the kana, right? Then we need to have the ism of kana.
I think it is yaral fara ya'akalu.
Ism will be just yara, isn't it?
No, because it's joining the next word.
This is an interesting one. It's actually, I had to think a few times about this one. It's not so straightforward.
Yeah, maybe it is yaral fara.
You've got.
Yaral fara.
Yeah, this
Because
whole thing
ya'akalu would be
that's the cover.
Ya'kulu is to eat.
That would cover the next.
Yeah, yakulu is cover starts from yakulu. Yaral fara would be ism, isn't it?
See, this is a little bit of self, and it does actually. If you think about it, actually, when we say kana, it's not a harf, it's a fi'l naqis. So it's a verb that affects jumla ismiyas, normally found. Here, there's no ism of kana following it. So, and what we said is that if there's no ism following it, you have to take it out from the verb itself. So there's actually a huwa. And that becomes the ism of kana, and all of this is the khabar of kana. Because, same principle. I've made a mistake there. Same principle. There would be a huwa there, and this would be the khabar of kana. Don't think too deeply about it. It will come gradually, but the point is that you have to have an ism and a khabar of kana, because this, if you look at it, is actually, there's a full phrase relationship going on. Here you have the fi'l, there's a huwa in with that to make the fa'il, and this is the maf'ul bihi.
And then you bring
And then you break down that maf'ul bihi. The maf'ul bihi, but you might say, well, hang on, that's a full sentence. Right? Where's the anna? There's no anna. Because there is actually a phrase relationship between al-fa'ru, which is flies, and all of this. There's a phrase relationship between these two, which we haven't covered yet. It's a little bit hard. You won't. I don't want you to necessarily understand it, but I just want you to appreciate, because the rule is that maf'ul bihi, right, which is all of that, yeah, should not be a sentence, right? Okay. This actually is not a sentence. It's a phrase relationship going on between al-fa'ra and yakulu ta'am mal asnama fala tamnahu is actually a phrase relationship going on, which we haven't covered yet. All right. If there was no phrase relationship between these two, then there would have to be an anna.
How can we tell there is a phrase relationship?
Because there are 15 phrase relationships, and we've already only covered 3 out of the 15. We covered the phrase which is the mawsul sifa, the noun and adjective, with the possessive one, which is like Zayd's book, mudaf ilay, and we followed the preposition in the house, which is a jar majrur relation. We only covered 3. This is another one, and this actually is probably, I would say, close to 6 months down the line for you to get this. We actually go through all of these things, and this actually is probably one of the most fundamental lessons in understanding planning. This is where everybody gets stuck, and they use the terminology of nested structures, meaning there are nests of structures within structures. And that's why, and they're all in that 15 phrases. And this is where people get lost. If you grasp this, this is your way to learning and getting into classical Arabic, is this. It's difficult to, even I'm struggling just even trying to explain to you. But there's a phrase relationship, which is why it doesn't have an anna. And you'll be able to appreciate that once we go through all the rules regarding nested structures. There's something going on here. It's okay.
Too much.
It's too much. Right. All we're going to summarize is that we've looked at anna. It's a converting structure. Maf'ul bihi cannot be a sentence. Anna converts it to a phrase. We understood that. That's the most important take-home message for today. The rest I talked about is just appreciate that there's a rule that we will cover way down the line, but we at least appreciate this step. What does the anna do? It's a converting structure. All right? That's all I want you to take home today in this new point. Okay? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.